That's the second method. So there were two main methods. They made up their numbers. I'm not going to call them data. The first one is the one I mentioned originally, where they simply assume that a roof will protect you from climate change.
Right.
And then they say, well, what's left, which is affected, there's an optimum temperature for agriculture. And so if you're in a region where the temperature is lower than the optimum and global warming raises the temperature, that'll be good for you. And there are others which are too warm, and that'll be bad, and on balance, minor effects. But the other thing is the one you talked about, and that was the first one I realised, because I read Richard Toll's 2009 paper, The Economic Impact of Climate Change. And I literally, my wife hadn't walked into the room with some food for me. She's done here a short while ago, and she's very Buddhist about these things. I would have gone into a deep depression because I read it and thought, you are so, can I swear in your program?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
It's encouraged.
It was so fucking stupid. You fucking idiots. You're going to kill us all. That was my reaction. Because what he said was they assumed that the temperature to GDP variation we find today can be used to proxy climate change. And this is what you're talking about here. So if you look at, for example, and I'm going to use two states of America in this example. If you look at Maryland and Florida, they differ in temperature by about 10 degrees Celsius, which is, say, about 16 degrees Fahrenheit. And Florida's got about a $20,000 per head GDP per capita income lower than Maryland's. So they said, well, that means that if temperature rises by 16 degrees Fahrenheit, GDP per head will fall by about 20%. Now, if temperature rises by 16 degrees Fahrenheit, we and most other life forms on this planet will be extinct. So what they're totally ludicrously saying, we can compare spots on the planet today, and the temperature difference and GDP difference can be used to predict the impact of climate change. They haven't got a clue what climate change really is. And did they make up their own numbers and reproduce them? It is totally absurd.
It's absurd to think that we could enter another ice age and have 60 to 80% of the planet covered in glaciers, or enter a new regime of higher temperatures, 5 or 10 degrees Celsius higher than today globally, which would have total desertification of the planet, and only experience a cumulative 20% reduction in total output, or a annual reduction in GDP per capita of 20%.
It's crazy. And like you make a good point with the freezing bit as well, because Nordhaus's damage function, which says what is going to be the impact of climate change on GDP, is a quadratic, and the y equals x squared. Well, the big question for a quadratic, the only thing is what's the parameter before the x squared, and his parameter before the x squared is now 0.00227, meaning that for each if there's a 1 degree increase in temperature, the decline in GDP will be less than 0.25%. That's back to the first number he used, 0.227. And then if it's 2 degrees, it's 4 times that, which is less than 1%. You get up to 4%, it's about a 4% fall. So there's trivial amounts, but it's a quadratic. Now we know that I think the ice age was roughly 4 to 6 degrees Celsius, 6 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit colder than now. And at that point, New York was below a kilometre of ice, and so is Chicago and all of a fair bit of Northern Europe. And according to that model, the GDP would be 7.9% smaller than it is today. Yeah, and that's how stupid it is. It deserves to be laughed at, not to be taken seriously. But these guys have taken it seriously. And like the worst I've seen, one thing, the paper that I've written, which I'm hoping to be published in Proceedings of the Royal Society sometime soon. One of my co-authors is Tim Lenton, who's a climate scientist who first started researching tipping points. And tipping points are things where like a small change in temperature can cause a total qualitative flip in something. So the clearest one is the Arctic. When the Arctic goes from being ice covered during summer to a clear of ice during summer, it goes from reflecting 90% of the solar energy that falls on it to absorbing 90%. So you get a dramatic increase in energy. That's a tipping point. And in this paper, written in 2008, Tim surveyed a whole lot of experts on different major components of the climate. And the conclusion was that there was a highly likely that we'd already tipped the Arctic, already tipped. And the Greenland and Arctic were clearly likely to go this century, and 5 of the 6 other systems could also surprise us by having a nearby tipping point. And Nordhaus's summary of that was to say their survey found no critical tipping points for the next 3 centuries for a temperature rise of less than 5 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, I looked at that and I thought if any school student or university student had submitted this paper as a summary of that paper, I would have failed him and probably kicked him out of the course.